Okay, so good morning. So what I want to discuss today, we're moving on in Adar. Last time we did Parshat Zachor, two shurim on that. Today I want to discuss Tainus Esther. So we're moving along. Tainus Esther already is on Yud Gimel Adar. But maybe, we've got Baal Koreh here and people who have heard the Megillah many more times than I have. I'll put it out there. When is where in the Megillah are we told that it's we're supposed to fast Tainus Esther? What's the pasuk?
Trick question.
That's correct. So do you mind if I call you Rabbi Schwartz? I just feel more comfortable doing that.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Rabbi Schwartz caught it. It's a trick question. It does not come up in the actual Megillah that we're supposed to fast.
It's just a practice. It's just we're imitating what they did, right?
Okay, beautiful. So what did they do? What you're referring to?
They fasted. When
which-
Esther said that before she went to Achashverosh, she said that everyone should fast for her.
Good. Okay, so that's that we will see sources for. So when is the earliest source? At what point do we start? When does this fast start? Like if it's not in the Megillah, when did it, become a thing, so to speak? Take a guess. When's the earliest source we have for Tainus Esther? If you get it wrong, it's
Would it
okay.
Would it be in the Gemara?
Would it be in the Gemara? Great question. So anyone want to guess earlier or later than Gemara? I'm not gonna answer Mark's question just yet.
Well, we could just say that they fasted then, the year. So then it was picked up, that, in commemoration of what happened, that they also fasted.
Right. But do you think it was picked up, end of
Right.
Sheni?
No, right away.
Oh, so from the very beginning, it wasn't in the
Yeah.
Megillah, but it was soon afterwards they turned it into an accepted fasting. Okay,
Right.
great.
Because there were all these things, like at the end they said, like they brought each other shloch manos, they did all these other things for the holiday, made a holiday out of it. So maybe they also did the Tainus Esther also.
Right, us Jews love fasting. We love eating. We love fasting. So they said, "Let's do it. Let's turn this into a fast." Okay, good. So I probably would have guessed like Steve, something like shortly thereafter. Mark, we'll see whether or not it is a Gemara. The earliest explicit source we have that I'm aware of, which talks about Tainus Esther, is the She'iltos, which I think is it's one of the Gaonim written in I think the 800s, maybe 900s, not exactly sure, but that's late. So we'll see. Was this practice a long-standing custom, or was this, or did this begin very late? The She'iltos just assumes that we do it. So we're not going to see the She'iltos inside. It is on the Mar Makomos. But maybe let's start with a different point, which is that we know when it couldn't have yet begun. Why? Because there's a source called the Megillas Tainus. Megillas Tainus was basically a list of holidays written at the end of Bayis Sheni, as I understand it. And it just goes through all the months, which days you're prohibited to fast and which days you're prohibited to have hespedim on it. And it's like just, it's like a calendar. So in Chodesh Adar, first source over here. So the Megillas Tainus says, B'tlei Sarbei, on the 13th, it's talking about Adar again, is Yom Nikanor. What's Yom Nikanor? Not really important for our purposes. It goes through a whole story of something which happened. And for that reason, they said, "Ubi hayom she'asu lo kach," whatever happened on Yom Nikanor, aso Yom Tov. So they decided that this day, the 13th of Adar, is now going to be a Yom Tov. Now the 13th of Adar is what?
Tainus Esther.
Right, the 13th of Adar is Tainus Esther. So it's explicit in Megillas Tainus that the 13th of Adar used to be a festive day. It was not and elsewhere in Megillas Tainus it says anytime we say it's a yontif, that means it's usher to fast and it's usher to have a hesped on that day. So it leaves us scratching our head. Now there's tons of these days in Megillas Tainus. We don't keep any of them, I believe, except for Hanukkah and Purim. Those are the only two which are mentioned in Megillas Tainus, which we do keep. but there's tons of days in Megillas Tainus. That's one of them on what we would nowadays call Tainus Esther. It used to be a happy day, not a fast day. Now, again, if you're a real Yeki, then it still is a happy day, but because Yekis love fasting, I think, but I'm not sure. Not sure if that's the case. But anyways, so where did this minhag come from? At what point does it develop? That's the question I want to tackle today and get a feel for what's going on here. Good. So let's start with the Gemara. So Mark said maybe it's a Gemara. It is, in fact, maybe a Gemara. The Gemara in Megillah over here is discussing something which needs a little bit of background. Nowadays, we always read the Megillah either on the 14th or the 15th of Adar. 14th for just about all normal places, and then if you're a walled city such as Yerushalayim, all the way from the times of Yoshua ben Nun, so then you would read it on, we do read it on the 15th. Now, the Mishnah at the beginning of Megillah says, in fact, under certain circumstances, you could even read on the 11th, 12th, and 13th. If they were a small little village and they needed a time to gather for whatever reason. So the Gemara. Say again?
Makdimin liyom haknisa.
Exactly. Makdimin liyom haknisa. So they would go back to the most recent Yom HaKnisa, the most recent day of gathering, which would be a Monday or Thursday, and that could be 11th, 12th, or 13th that they would read the Megillah on that day. Now the Gemara tries to figure out, how do you know? Meaning this is there's a takana over here. You have to read Megillah. How do you know that you're able to read the Megillah on earlier days than the 14th and 15th? So it tries to figure out what's the source that 11th, the 12th, the 13th is good, and it has a tuck away line over here, which seems innocuous, but we'll see might have a lot of significance for our topic, which says as follows in source 3. The Amar of Shmuel bar Yitzchak, how do you know that the 13th you're allowed to go and read Megillah on the 13th under certain circumstances? Because it says Shlosha Asar, it doesn't say, but because Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak said Shlosha Asar is the Zman Kihila L'chol Chi, below Tzarich L'Ribuye. The 13th is the Zman Kihila, it's the time of gathering for everyone, and you don't need a pasuk or something in the Megillah to tell me you can read the Megillah, because it's obvious you can read the Megillah, because it's this Zman Kihila L'chol, right? So I'm not going to ask you what do you think that this is a reference to, because you're in Tainus Esther mode right now. So let's take a look at Rashi. How does Rashi translate Zman Kihila L'chol? Rashi says in the brackets over here, he says Zman Kihila L'chol Hakol Nikalu Lihinakei Me'oivehem. What happened on the 13th? Everyone gathered to go and get revenge from their enemies. Bein b'shushan, bein b'shar makomos. In the times of the Megillah, when we had the big war with all of our enemies. So on the 13th, everyone gathered together. K'moshe katsuv b'sefer, like it says in the Megillah. Hilkach lo tzarich kralu ribuye she'roi l'kriya. So says Rashi, I don't need a pasuk to tell you that you're able to read the Megillah on the 13th. To ikar hanes bohaya, because that day where we all gathered to go and fight, that itself was, I guess, the I don't know if it was really the Iker Hanes, if the fighting continued until the next day, but that day was a very significant day in the war itself, and therefore it makes a lot of sense that we're able to read the Megillah on that day. So according to Rashi, this line has absolutely nothing to do with our topic. This line is really just talking about the 13th was a day where we fought against, where we gathered to fight against our enemies. But the Rabbeinu Tam, quoted by just about all the other Rishonim. There's no Tosfos there who actually says this, but the other Rishonim clearly have a tradition from Rabbeinu Tam. Here's just one. I took one, the Chidushei Haran in source 4. He says as follows: "V'kasheli the Rabbeinu Yaakov." Right? Who's Rabbeinu Yaakov? Rabbeinu Yaakov is Rabbeinu Tam. Why we call Rabbeinu Yaakov Rabbeinu Tam? Because the Torah says that B'Yaakov Ish Tam, that Yaakov Avinu was an Ish Tam. So Rabbeinu Tam is really a nickname for Rabbeinu Yaakov, that we call him Rabbeinu Tam. But Kashelei the Rabbeinu Yaakov, that Rabbeinu Tam was bothered by Rashi's interpretation that it just meant they gathered for war. What should the Gemara have said? Zman milchama lecholhi. It shouldn't have said it's a zman kihila, a day of gathering. It should have said it's a zman of it was the day of war. So it's the wrong terminology if Rashi's interpretation is really correct. So v'nira lo dahachi perusha. This is really what it means. Zman kihila lecholhi sharei misasfi miyachad letainis Esther dahava biyom yud gimel. What were they gathered? What does it mean that they gather? They gather because that's Tainus Esther. Of course, you're going to gather together on the 13th. That's the day of gathering. Everyone's fasting. Everyone's umisaspim sham b'nei hayaros ukfarim. Everyone gets together in shul and they start singing. They start davening and they're doing slichos, etc. So they're gathering together to daven. And therefore, you don't need a pasuk to go and tell you that that you're able to say the Megillah reading on the 13th. So he then quotes the She'iltos, but we'll pause right there. So this part I don't really have so clear, so maybe someone has a better understanding. But Rabbeinu Tam says because it's Tainus Esther and everyone's gathering, therefore it's a day which is fit for Kriyas HaMegillah. And I don't need a pasuk to tell you it's fit for Kriyas HaMegillah. So I just didn't totally understand what that meant, meaning why does the fact that everyone's gathering together for Tainus Esther make it a day which is fit to read the Megillah?
Presume.
Oh, you're saying it's a smart time to read the Megillah because everyone happens to be gathered together.
Yeah.
Got it. So meaning for Rashi says it's fundamental. This was the day we're celebrating basically the Nes. So it makes sense we're reading the Megillah. You're saying it's not necessarily anything to do with the Megillah itself, but we're all gathered together. It's a good day to go and read the Megillah for Pirsume Nisa.
For Rabbeinu Tam also.
Right. I'm just saying that the gathering of Tainus Esther isn't the same. It's not commemorating the miracle necessarily.
It's not commemorating the miracle, but it's connected. It's the same story. So it is connected. The fasting and everything, it is connected to the miracle.
Okay, right. You're saying that the fasting we did in the times of when Esther asked us to fast was part of the miracle itself.
Right. That God listened to us. He listened to our prayers. So it's part of it. So it's all connected, So if they're together and for Tainus Esther, you could also read the Megillah on that day.
Beautiful. So everyone over here so far is assuming that the reason we're fasting is because that's when that they fasted when Esther asked everyone to fast for 3 days, correct?
Right.
So
I read ahead and I see
Jacob read ahead. So let's take a peek back at that source. Jacob always reads ahead or is paying attention when we read behind. He got me in the Lechem Mishnah shir this past Shabbos. Fine. So if we continue that source, what does Rabbeinu Tam actually say the reason that we're fasting is? It's not what we'd expect. He says as follows: Uviyom Yud Gimel Asu Tainus Bimei Mordechai the Esther. On the 13th, they created a Tainus in the days, right? This is interesting. He's saying in the days of Mordechai and Esther, it was created. The Vishiboni Kalu Amod al Nafsham, because on the 13th, that's when they gathered to go and gather to protect themselves. And they needed rachamim on that day. This was the day that they were going to fight against all their enemies. They needed God's intervention, his mercy on us. And for that reason, they decided, you know what, this is pretty counterintuitive. We're about to go to war. Instead of eating well and making sure we're physically fit, let's all fast, right? Great idea. Get rachamim from Hashem if you really believe Hashem's in control. So instead of focusing on the physical specifically, you focus on tshuva. This was this last week's parsha. Rashi quotes at the end of last week's parsha on B'Shalach that when we fought with Amalek, so I think Aaron and Hur fasted while everyone else fought against Amalek. So says Rabbeinu Tam, says all these Rishonim, it's not just Rabbeinu Tam, it's the Ran, it's the Rosh, it's the Rajbats, really most of the Rishonim over there, they say that the reason we fast Tainus Esther, first of all, it goes all the way back to the times of the Megillah is what it sounds like, or very soon after the Megillah. But B, the reason we're doing it has nothing to do with Esther asking everyone, hey, fast 3 days for us. It's because on the 13th, right, the day of Tainus Esther, that's when we gathered for war. When we gathered for war, it was an appropriate time to fast to go and get rachamim from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we're commemorating the fasting, which happened when we went to war on that day.
How do we know Moshe and that they fasted?
Good question. I don't know. Rashi mentioned it on the end of last week's parsha. I don't know what the limud is.
Okay.
Then how come it's not mentioned in that first source in the Megillus Tanis?
Beautiful, right? So Steve's question number one from Steve: why in Megillus Tainus does it say the exact opposite, that it's a festive day, not a Tainus Esther? Good. So let's maybe just I'll tell you what I think you have to say. I'm not sure. I think you have to say, if you want to entertain this shot, somehow keep it consistent with the Megillus Tainus, is that they made the fast, then maybe during the times of Bayit Sheni, they got rid of the fast, and then it came back into being afterwards. I don't know. I mean, it's difficult. Without a doubt, it's difficult. I'm not sure how else to.
What was the time? What was the time of Megillus Tanis? Like, what was
Megillus Tainus was written, I believe, at the end of Bayis Sheni. So, right, the whole Purim story happens in between Bayis Rishon and Bayis Sheni, and then you have 420 years, I think, of Bayis Sheni. So Megillus Tainus, I believe, is written near the end of those 420 years of Bayis Sheni. I don't have an exact date, but maybe Wikipedia or something might. As I type it into my computer as we speak, I'm not sure they have a specific date for the Megillus Tainus. Ancient text, no. Okay, I'm not sure. Extra credit for anyone who figures that out and sends an email afterwards. Good. So question one is that the date, first of all, their assumption seems to go against the Megillus Tainus. There might be a better answer, but I think that the difficulty is definitely there. Maybe I'll raise another question. What's the name of this fast again? This is not a trick question yet.
Tanis Esther?
Right. So what Tainus Esther? What does Esther have to do with anything over here?
Because she risked her life. She risked her life to go see Achashverosh.
Right, but according to this, the reason we fast has nothing to do with her risking her life to see Achashverosh. It has to do with the war effort on the 13th.
Yes, there could be a war.
Oh, so there could be a war, meaning the fact that there is a war is still because of what Esther did.
Well, she asked for permission for the war.
Right. Oh, I see. Right. Saying it was because of what she asked for that we had the war in the first place. Okay, I like Rabbi Schwartz's answer, I think, more than probably what I'm about to read. But I'll tell you, the Mishnah Berurah answers this question. I thought his answer was, I didn't totally understand it. But maybe if you combine with what Rabbi Schwartz is saying with the Mishnah Berurah, we can have a more full answer. So the Mishnah Berurah addresses this issue. He's quoting the Chai Adam in source 5. He says, "V'nikra Tainus Esther k'dei lizkor." It's called Tainus Esther to remember Hashem Yisbarach roeh v'shomea kol ish be'es tzaraso, that Hashem sees and hears every single person in their time of pain. Kasher yis'aneh, when he fasts, v'yashuv el Hashem b'chol levavu k'mo she'asa b'yamim hahem. That the same way that Hashem listened to us when we fasted back then, so too he listens to anyone when they fast and do tshuva. So why again is it called Tainus Esther? So I think what he's saying is the same way that when Esther fasted, we know she was successful in that fast, that fast, bore fruit and everything went well with Achashverosh. So too, that's supposed to remind us that this fast we're doing now, if we fast, it'll work out well. I think that's what he's saying. And then you can add to that what Rabbi Schwartz just said, that the whole thing is happening because of because of the effects of Esther's fast, that Esther's fast led to her going to Achashverosh and making this request that we can go and fight. And so you put those two together, and maybe now we have a better idea of why it's called Tainus Esther. Fine. So we have this approach so far, right? This approach says it went all the way back to the times of the Megillah, and it seems to be against the Megillus Tainus. You have to get around that somehow. The name Tainus Esther is still a little bit strange. That's all camp number 1. Okay, so keep that in your pocket right now, because we're about to get to camp number 2, a different school of thought, which I think everyone else here has been assuming, at least in part, and that's that this fast has nothing to do, right? Just by the way, when did, before I before we get to this, just the chronology. When did Esther fast to go and see Achashverosh? Anyone know what time of the year that was?
Pesach.
Pesach, right? So the Gemara in Megillah, I don't know where the Gemara in Megillah learns this from, but the Gemara in Megillah says that it was Pesach time when Esther fasted and she went to Achashverosh. And there's this whole back and forth. She says fast, and they say, what do you mean fast? There's a mitzvah of, first of all, it's a yontif, and also there's a mitzvah of eating matzah. And she says something along the lines of, well, if we all die, it's not going to really matter that there's this thing called Pesach because no one's going to be keeping Pesach. They're like, all right, we'll fast. So the conversation went something like that. Okay, so it happened in Pesach. So we'll keep that in mind. So comes along the Shiboli Halket. The Shiboli Halket is a 1200 sefer from Italy, written in the 1200s. It's mostly just piskei halacha, like it's a halacha sefer where he discusses how he came to his conclusions, and it's based on chiefly the base medrash of Rashi. So somehow he has a lot of texts from Rashi's base medrash. It seems like he wasn't actually there in the base medrash. He's always quoting b'shem Rashi, but it's an important work. It ends up getting quoted by the Beis Yosef, the author of the Shokanara, almost every couple pages in the Beis Yosef. So it gets a lot of press, and that's how it continues its legacy, so to speak. So says the Shiboli Halket, we have a custom. We fast the day before Purim. To remember, here's the line: the tzomos which they did in the days of Mordechai and Esther, right? Even though those fasts were in the days of Pesach, right? It seems to have nothing to do with the 13th of Adar. For whatever reason, we have a minhag. We decided let's bump it up to the 13th of Adar. Okay, that's part one. Then he continues. Matzati b'shem Rabbi Shlomo Zatzal. I found in the name of Rabbi Shlomo Zatzal. Again, that's Rashi. So he found, I don't know what manuscripts he has in front of him, but he hears that Rashi, there was the following story with Rashi. That Ma'aseh v'iru Purim be'echad b'Shabbos. It was once happened that Purim fell on Sunday. V'kidmu hakal lis'anos b'chamishi b'Shabbos. Kimin hagaki hilos. And the congregation therefore bumped Tainus Esther like we do earlier onto Thursday, because that's what the minhag is, that when Purim falls out on Sunday, we bump up Tainus Esther earlier to Thursday. So there was a woman who needed, I don't know exactly what this means, but she had to go and ride. I guess she was traveling with someone in the government. I don't know what the story is over here, but for some reason she had to go and travel on that day with some government official. And she asked Rashi, do I need to fast tomorrow? It's going to be a really tough day. We're going to be traveling the whole time. I don't get to just sit in bed. So what will I do? Today is the day of Tainus Esther. She asks, can I go and fast tomorrow? Right? Tomorrow's going to be Friday. Today's Thursday, when everyone else is fasting. She says, instead of fasting today, can I fast tomorrow on Friday? I'd like to eat today because this trip is going to be pretty exhausting. I'd much prefer to fast tomorrow than to fast today. The Amar Rav, and said Rashi, Tainus ze eino midivrei Torah velo midivrei Sofrim. This fast is neither mideoraita. It is also not midivrei Sofrim. It's not even midrabanan. Ela minhag bialma. It's just a minhag. Shrei Tainus shal Mordechai ve'Esther hayu bimei Pesach. This Tainus has absolutely, it's really hard to understand. This fast, the fasting happened in Pesach. It's the 13th of Adar when we're keeping this. So this is just a minhag. This is not the biggest deal, says Rashi. You don't need to worry so much about this fast. He ends up saying at the end that tshuva, because you shouldn't be porish minat tzibur. I'm not so sure about it. But he is makil for sure for people who are sick and other people, because this fast is not like all the other fasts, right? All the other fasts have their sources. They have, psukim. And this one, says Rashi, it's not even Midivrei Sofrim. Like, we have no sources for this text, right? And that's going to be Rashi Lishitaso, right? Because in the Gemara and Megillah, the only source we have, which maybe references the Tainus Esther, Zman Ki L'Cholhi, Rashi translated that as something totally different. Rashi said Zman Ki L'Cholhi means, they gathered for war, but nothing to do with Tainus Esther. So Rashi says that what is Tainus Esther? It's a fast we do on the 13th of Adar. It's a remembrance to the 3 days of fasting which Esther and the Jews did before during Pesach. Right. So what do we gain with this? What do we gain with this interpretation? Well, I guess if the question before didn't bother you so much, you won't appreciate the plus side here. The plus side is that at least Tinus Esther now makes a lot of sense, right? Why call it Tinus Esther? Well, it's because this is a really, really close commemoration of what Esther did, that she asked, hey, everyone, please fast for 3 days. And she herself fasted for 3 days right before Esther went ahead and went to Achashverosh. So the name fits beautifully for this interpretation of Rashi. What are the issues, right? Anyone, any questions on this interpretation? What doesn't fit with the way we do things?
Only fast for 1 day.
Great. Rabbi Schwartz says we fast only for 1 day, right? How long did they fast? Back then they fasted 3 days. And trivia question, did they fast? Should it be a day only fast or should it be a day and night fast? Right. So I don't even know what this means. The text in Megillah says that they fasted 3 days, day and night. I know what that means. Maybe that means they were drinking water. They were drinking orange juice. I'm not sure. Maybe someone has looked into that. I think there's even a Gemara in Nedarim or Shavuos. It says if someone promises that they're not going to drink for 3 days, so we say that that's a Shavuos shav, that it's an inherently false shvua because someone would drop dead if they were to not drink for 3 days straight. So maybe
but Rabbi, that's not a hard thing to answer. I mean, just we don't have to imitate exactly what they did. We're just commemorating what they did. So we fast for the day just to commemorate what they did. Doesn't mean we have to do exactly what they did.
Right. So okay, good. So Steve, I think you're right. Steve's saying, okay, it's not exact. It's a first of all, it's only a minhag. This isn't like a perfectly set in stone commemoration. And furthermore, it is just a commemoration. So if you were to tell everyone 3 days of fasting, day and night every year, you can imagine that would not be so happily accepted by the community. So commemoration, they fasted, we fast, and that's good enough.
It says, by the way, al tochlu va'al tishtu.
Oh wow. Okay, so I'm out of luck.
Yeah, no, I always wondered also. So they really.
Yeah. So we can add more homework. So Megillah's Tainus date, and what does it mean that everyone fasted for 3 days and 3 nights, food and drink? I'm not sure. There is going to be an answer. I just don't know what the answer is offhand. You have time until the actual Megillah reading to figure it out. A few weeks. Okay, so we have the plus side. We have some of the issues over here. How do we paskin, so to speak?
But just about the story, the fact that it was nidche or anything has nothing really to do with the story.
You're saying in the Rashi story?
Yeah.
Good question. I did see some people say that no, specifically because it was nidche, so therefore Rashi was willing to be mekel, but not if it weren't nidche. We'll see in the next source. I believe the Shokanara assumes it applies to everything, meaning Rashi wasn't emphasizing the fact that it was nidche. I think that probably because it was nidche, so the woman felt more. It made more sense to look, we're not doing it the right day anyways. So what difference does it make if I do Thursday or Friday? Yeah, go for it.
Isn't there one of the fasts is at the 10th of Tevet? It's the one fast that can be on a Friday. So there's sort of an understanding that there could be a nidcha to a Friday under certain circumstances, but here we're going to be even more mekel, and we all know that the 10th of Tevet is only, the Asmina Sfarim, to that extent, if it is even that, right? So I'm saying, it could be that this is really a conversation as to, how far you push the nidcha idea.
Right. Can we move nidcha around to wherever we want? So I'll be honest, I didn't look enough into the nidcha issue. Right? I do know that there's one thing. Regularly when we have a nidcha, so we push a fast later. Right? We don't like to be makdim pur anut. We don't like to, bring bad things earlier. So fast days we try and push off rather than to push earlier. But by Tainus Esther, because Tainus Esther is a funny sort of fast where it's not really sad, really, right? The fasting we're doing regularly when we fast, it's because some tragedy happened to Kal Yisrael. Right, the Beis Hamikdash was surrounded; it was destroyed. Luchos were broken, something like that. the fast day, which we're talking about, whichever interpretation you're going to accept of what we've seen, either we fasted and we won the war, or we fasted and we killed Haman and we won the war. Either way, this is a funny fast, and for that reason, we're comfortable bringing it earlier. And then, like Mark's saying, maybe it's a question of, how early and are we willing to move it around exactly. 100%. So what's the accepted reason, right? If you look in Shokanara, so we have these two interpretations. We have the one which I think most Rishonim take, and then the other one which I think everyone assumes. I think everyone assumes that the fasting which we do on Tainus Esther is because of what Esther had everyone fast. So if you look in the Shokanara, this is source 7 over here. He says V'tainus ze eno chova. He's quoting from the Shiboli Halket, the same type of language. Lachein yesh lahakel bo la'esa tzorech. So if you have some sort of need, don't worry about it. Kegon me'ubaros o menikos. Anytime a woman is pregnant or she's nursing, o lachol she'ein bo sakana, or someone who's sick, even though they're not so sick, they're just whatever, they're bedridden, they have a migraine. Tell them, don't worry about it. This is not Yom Kippur over here. This isn't Tisha B'Av. This is not a chova. So that language that it's not a chova, the Be'er Hagra says that that's because it's not really connected to the 13th. Meaning, says the Be'er Hagra, that this is that we essentially accept Rashi's reasoning. The two issues above, about 3 days, 1 day, night, day, that's not really an issue. It's just a commemoration. It's a remembrance. You don't have to get all upset about that. So the question then, which I think we have to deal with, and this is the elephant in the room that even the Rishonim are kind of like, this is a little bit weird. But why then do we celebrate this fast day celebrate the fast day on the 13th of Adar? Right? What does Pesach have to do with, why not do it back in Nisan when it actually happened? Yeah, go for it, Jacob.
Well, I would say that one of the big themes of Purim is the nahapachu. You have to experience a kind of a reversal of fortune. That's what. So that's why they kind of instituted. There's a fast, and then we're in pain. We're suffering, and then all of a sudden we have this kind of major holiday. It just kind of like builds on that theme of the nahapachu kind of thing.
I really like that. That's you just came up with that on the spot?
Yeah.
That's very good. I like that a lot. I did not see that, but I'm going to write that down for the next time. Beautiful. Yeah. So I remember when the first time I experienced Yom HaZikaron followed by Yom HaAtzmaut. So that was a very weird feeling. All of a sudden, you have in Israel saying, Chutzlaretz, unfortunately, we don't feel it quite as much as we should. But in Eretz Yisrael, like everyone's really like sad. People are crying. And then all of a sudden it's a holiday a moment later. It felt very, very off and very strange. But on Purim, that sense of Nahabochu maybe is much more easy to understand. And there's a lot of reason for why it is that way in Israel also, but I like that a lot. Okay, I didn't see that. I like that answer. I'll give you some other answers, unless anyone else has any other ideas, which I saw.
I once saw a source, I don't remember where it was, that all of our holidays have an association with eating and fasting. That everyone is always maybe similar to it, Jacob, to show to temper, the eating. But we have there's a fast before Pesach. We have to eat the day before Yom Kippur. That every time there's always.
That's very interesting. You're saying balance itself out.
Yeah.
So let's maybe take a look. I think I have a source here which says something like that. This source is from the Magid Meshar. Anyone ever hear of the Magid Mesharim before? It's not a famous sefer. It was written by the Beit Yosef.
What did Joe say? I missed it. What did Joe say? What Rabbi Schwartz say?
What Rabbi Schwartz said was that all of our days of fasting and feasting are balanced out with each other. So like right before Yom Kippur, where we're going to fast, you have a day of eating right beforehand. And right before Pesach, we have Tainus Bechoros to kind of, I guess, temper any extreme feelings in either direction. So he was saying maybe that's what's going on over here, that right before we're going to have Purim, crazy amount of simcha, so we're trying to kind of balance that out with a fast right beforehand. So I don't have the exact same answer. Yeah.
But you could also just say plainly, like just to have this fast in the middle near Pesach, it's sort of out of context, and I'm saying like the fast, belongs, for the miracle, if you're fasting to commemorate what they did and the miracle and everything, like it should be together with when we celebrate the miracle as well. It just logically, it just fits that it should be together.
Beautiful.
It's not anything chachma or anything crazy. It's just logic to put them together.
Right. It's Purim. It was a Purim miracle. It was related to Purim. You put it a month earlier, a month later, no one's gonna have a clue what's going on.
We're gonna fast. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
Like if there was no Purim, and we didn't celebrate Purim, then you could have it any day. But given that we have Purim, it makes sense to have the fast right by Purim.
Right. I think you're probably right that's the simple explanation.
You could say along the lines of what Steve is saying, since we can't fast on Pesach, so it's nidche, you might as well nidche it all the way to Purim.
Right. Once we can't do it in the right time, so we might as well push it to the day which is thematically related. Okay, good. So I saw basically Rav Rimon. I think his name's Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon, but he's one of the big poskim in Dati Leumi poskim in Israel, who has some beautiful svarim. So he basically says that, and I think that's probably the simple explanation, 100%. But I do want to bring up this one other explanation, which Rabbi Schwartz made mention to, which is the Magid Mesharim. The Magid Mesharim is published, I'm taking this from Wikipedia over here, published in 1646. It's a mystical diary in which Rabbi Yosef Cairo, during a period of 50 years, recorded the nocturnal visits of the Magid, an angelic being, his heavenly mentor, the personified Mishnah, I don't know what that means. His visitor spurred him to acts of righteousness and even asceticism, exhorted him to study the Kabbalah, and reproved him for his moral laxities. So the Magid Mesharim is a very interesting sefer. In general, it's basically the Beis Yosef saying, I had an angel appear to me in my dreams. I'm just writing down everything which he told me. Now, it was only published after the Beis Yosef died. It seems to have just been his diary. It doesn't seem to have been something which he intended to publish for others, kind of, when an angel visits you in your dreams. So sometimes you want to keep that to yourself, I guess. But after posthumously, it was published. Very interesting sefer. In general, the poskim have no idea what to do with it. Do we rely on angels? Do we not? In general, we say lo bashamayim kind of thing. It's kind of just interesting text, and people quote it, when it lines up with what they want to say or what others say. But it's not like a main source in halacha. But it's got very interesting hashkafic ideas. So in there, it has the following line. So this is the Magid Mesharim. He says in Parshas Vayakel, "V'zeh sod hatainis" in source 8. Shemit anin b'yud gimel be'adar. This is why we fast on the 13th of Adar. V'hula hachnia kolcho shel hayetzer hara milahasti. The reason we fast on the 13th is because we are trying to prevent the Yetzer Hara from causing us problems. How? Ulahorot. It's going to teach us. That when we are so happy and we're drinking, tons of alcohol, not that we're necessarily doing that, but back in the day when everyone, of course, was drinking tons of alcohol on Purim, the reason they're doing this is not chas v'shalom because they love giving into their physical pleasures, but the reason we do it is because we are trying to serve God. The proof to this is that right before we have this crazy day of Simcha, we fast right beforehand the hachnia taivas hayetzer hara to show that we're, we are in control of our yetzer hara. We are able to hold back when we need to hold back. So when we then go ahead and we then have some crazy partying and drinking, that demonstrates that the reason we're doing that is out of control. It's because we think that we're supposed to do it and not because we necessarily just want to do it and are enjoying. So I think that's something similar to what Rabbi Schwartz was saying, right? We're trying to, we don't want Purim to become a day of hololus, just insanity. I remember my first year in Israel, I was at Hakotel, and I was so disturbed by, it's very unfortunate, but I was very, very upset and disturbed by Purim. because you would walk out of Hakotel. If anyone's been to Hakotel, it's right there in the Rova. You walk out of the Rova into the Rova on Purim, and the whole Rova smells like vomit. It's really it's disturbing. It's just disgusting. But people are really having a little bit a little too loose, and the day turns into a day which is just unfortunate. People
The
aren't.
whole Jerusalem. The whole Jerusalem. People, that whole night, I had to get out of there. I couldn't take it. People were drunk and yelling and screaming and dancing in the streets and blocking traffic. I just said, this is unbelievable.
I didn't make it that far.
It's a chil Hashem.
Yeah.
It really was a chil. I couldn't believe it.
It's a problem. The Mishnah Berurah makes reference when we last year we talked about the drinking sugya. That's what the Achronim are so upset about. That when Purim, which is supposed to be a spiritual happy day, turns into a day of just, drunken, throwing up, and ending up in the hospital. So obviously that is a chil Hashem. That's a problem, which needs to be fixed. So the reason we have the Tainus Esther is to go and remind ourselves, says the Magid Meisharim, that the reason we're drinking is in order to elevate ourselves. And for another time, we can figure out exactly why drinking, could be positive in certain circumstances. But I thought that was a nice idea, just to put into perspective why we're fasting on the 13th. We want to do it right before Purim for that reason. And then we have 1 minute left, so I'll just point out, we already made this point, but already in Rishonim, right, whichever interpretation you take, whether you take the Rashi interpretation that we're commemorating what Esther did, or you take the interpretation that we were gathering for the war, either way, the fast which we're commemorating, the day which we're commemorating, everything worked out great. This is a one-of-a-kind type of fast, and the Sefer Kolbo says that this is a Tainus Shel Simcha. It's a happy fast. It's a very interesting idea. So on fast days, there's often many chumras people have. Some people, people who are, a lot of times the Shokanara, the Mishnah Berurah will tell you, Bal Nefesh will be machmir, not to listen to music, or not to take a shower on a fast day, or not to get a haircut. There's all of these different halachos, which aren't necessarily halacha, but which are midot chasidut throughout fast days, that we treat them in a fashion more fitting of a day of fasting. On Tainus Esther, none of that applies. No one says don't get a haircut. No one says, maybe someone says, but almost no one says don't listen to music. It's a really weird day, but we're not. It's a happy day, and although we are fasting, we're fasting in order to maybe demonstrate that that we're celebrating Purim for the right reason, or we're fasting, like Jacob said, to commemorate the B'nai HaFochu. But it's a happy day of fasting, which makes it a very interesting dynamic, different from all the other fast days. So with that, we'll end here, and happy to take any comments, questions, or anything else. Have a great day.
All right.
Bye,
Thank you.
Rabbi. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.